Let us have a look at a couple of options regarding VIO photorealistic rendering. The first thing is any AEC object that you select and then go to object properties will give you all the properties of the selected object, but included in there is a materials option. Clicking on the materials option, you can see which material that wall currently uses. So if you want to modify, change, for instance, the texture or the finish of that material, you know which one to modify. Another option that we've got is maybe you don't want to always render the complete drawing. As done on the 2D side earlier as well, you can select certain objects and then from the context sensitive menu just ask to hide those objects. Once they are hidden and you render this model, it will render the scope only. In other words, it will render only the information that you see on screen. If you go to layer display and show all the layers again, and you should do a render now, all the information available on screen will be rendered. Then I also want to take you quickly through certain render settings, VIO render settings. Now before I change any settings, sometimes you do a model and you want to render that. As soon as you render it, the end result or the photorealistic rendered image it creates is not exactly what you expected. So let's just have a look at that. If I render this model, I'm just going to do a full render. Scene size is about 20 meters. Render, and let's have a look at the render and the end result that we'll get. I'm going to cancel the render around about halfway through, so we just have more or less an indication of what the initial results are, and then afterwards I'm going to change that into something that's hopefully a bit more realistic. You can see starting from the top, the sky in the background, the tree, RPC tree in the background, that looks quite fine. As soon as you start looking at the model, you will see it's quite washed out, quite bright, no real definition in the model. That's because of certain render settings that was not configured properly. So I'm going to give it another couple of seconds so we can just see the windows coming out. And then I'm going to cancel that render just by pressing escape on the keyboard. I don't want to save the image, no. And you can see clearly that's the end result that we have. So if I close that render and I go into the VIO environment setting the VIO render environment, there's a couple of changes I'm going to make. The ambient lighting, we can move down to something like 5 or 8. Even go down as low as 2. The natural lighting, the brightness, I can move up bright to dull. Now this is a sunny day, so it will be closer on the bright side. Then the sun intensity is basically the difference between your direct lighting or sun and the sky, which could be your clouds or hazy area around your model. So because it's a clear sky day, I'm going to move it slightly to this side. And I'm going to keep all the rest of the settings as is. So having done that, I'm going to do another render without changing anything else in my model, and let's see what end result we get right now. And rendering is much like photography. Most good quality pictures that you take with a camera, basically all good pictures or good photography revolves about good lighting and getting your lighting settings correctly. And the same applies to rendering. So just by changing a couple of slight minor changes, making it in your environment settings can end up in a much more realistic rendered image at the end of the day. And as you can see from the render we get in front of us now, much more definition. You can see the shadows and sun position, much more bump or roughness within the textures. So all in all, just a better and more realistic rendered image.